Wanted to just say a few words about Ryler Dustin. Um, I'm going to say it was maybe around 2003 or 4, perhaps. I moved to Bellingham, and right away I was looking for my people, and I found poetry night that was a regular open mic there in one of the pubs in Bellingham. And one of the regular people who showed up was young Ryler Dustin, and he was in high school, I think. And I thought, oh my gosh, that kid has got the chops. I hope it isn't just a passing thing. And lo and behold, it stuck. So we're lucky enough to have him read some of his poetry with us tonight. I'll read a little bit of his bio to you. He's the author of a poetry collection, Heavy Lead Birdsong, from Right Bloody Publishing. And he, as I said, is a native of Bellingham, Washington. He's received residencies from Jack Kerouac Project of Orlando and the Marjorie Davis Boyden Wilderness Writing Residency. And he represented Seattle on the final stage of the Individual World Poetry Slam. So he's got a pretty broad, what do I want to say? A broad in terms of his writing styles. And his poems have appeared in outlets such as Colorado Review, American Life in Poetry, and the Massachusetts Review. He's also working on a novel called Horse Mender, and I've read just a smidgen of it. It sounds fantastic, and he may give us a little bit of a tip on what he's doing with that, as well as reading from his poetry for us. So let's give a nice warm Olympia welcome to Ryler Dustin.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really nice to be kind of vicariously back in the Northwest. I'm really excited. I got my vaccine, and so I'm going to be traveling back this summer, and I can't wait. I really it's great to see you again, Terry. I recognize a couple of you, and I'm just, this is so nourishing, just seeing people's faces and connecting that to poetry, because I'm kind of in the process with this manuscript that I'm working on right now, where it feels pretty close to finished. I keep tinkering with it, but I'm mostly sending it out to places, which, as I imagine a lot of you are writers as well, and that process is like 90% rejection, so it's really nice to just to have that, just a drop of that energy that has always been so important to me, kind of in the open mic scene in Bellingham that Terry mentioned, and in slam poetry, and just remembering that poetry is about people and about bringing us closer together, and I think that can sometimes feel kind of abstract, like in the midst of a long pandemic and just all the communication being over email, and mostly rejections and the occasional acceptance, and then the acceptance is still kind of like, great, this is this kind of form letter you get and you feel good, but it's not the same as just sharing words with people. So I think as Terry may have mentioned, I'm in Michigan now, and my wife is in a PhD English program here, and so I'm a few hours ahead of y'all, and I'm gonna try to stick around for the open mic and make it through that, because I really want to hear some of your work. And so I'm just gonna jump right in, and so this is kind of, I decided I wanted to just kind of try out parts of this manuscript that I'm working on. and I'm kind of working with a couple different potential titles for it right now. But it's um, one of the titles is The Western Edge of Light, and the manuscript is kind of exploring the Pacific Northwest and what it has meant to grow up there and leave there and still feel really pulled back to that place. Um, and I guess I'm kind of nervous because it's been a little while since I've given a reading. And so I'm just going to jump right in and not ramble too much about all these poems. But maybe we can chat afterward, unless I'm passed out here on my futon. and So I want to start with a poem called A Secret that kind of sets up, I guess, sort of an origin poem in some ways, basically through kind of an accident that could have, claimed my life, I guess, and claimed the life of a lot of people in my hometown of Bellingham. So this is called A Secret. If a boy's palm curls to cup the whisper of flame, if he stands passing a butane lighter back and forth with his friend, it is to learn how beauty burns the fingers, how the forbidden holds inside of it the holy. The lighters hiss and click a spell, an incantation among young pines, where Watcom Creek runs below the hush of wind in cedars. Now his friend, who has carried in secret a tattered sack from the Lummi Reservation, lifts a fountain firework, lights it, and summons a shower of sparks into the dry, white heat of June. How could they know, standing just feet from the creek's edge, that the water itself would burn? Sparks blossom on the swirling current into a crest of flame, a rill of widening fire, their clothes effervescing, then their breaths, the needles of the pines incandescent. While not far from the office of the company whose pipeline had leaked, I look up from my homework, the windows of my grandmother's trailer shuddering in their crooked sills. Two boys, whose initials notched two desks at school, had discovered the secret leaking toward town, had saved everyone west of the breach, the mayor said. Boys whose names stand on plaques in Watcom Park, whose stories parents whisper like a warning. Stephen Siorvis, Wade King, they who called a secret forth into flame, who found a burning world inside our water. So, I imagine many of you who've lived in the Northwest remember, or at least have heard about the Olympic pipeline explosion that was in Bellingham. So that's what that is kind of wrestling with. So thank you. It's so strange and ghostly, as we are all so familiar with now, to be interacting over Zoom. This is a short little poem, and this is for my grandma, Thelma Thorson. And the other night, actually, it was, one of the first times my wife and I had hung out with anyone else in a while. And I was telling kind of the story of my grandmother who used to collect unicorns. And this is completely irrelevant to the poem, what I'm telling you right now, but it might give you just kind of a sense of who she is, or I just think it's kind of interesting and beautiful that she would collect these unicorns, but she would only believe that they were legitimate unicorns if they had like that tuft of like fur, that kind of like a goat has. And so the whole trailer was just filled with unicorns, unicorn, every item was also unicorn, the clock, the coat hanger, the dishes, the mugs, everything was unicorns. And they all had this like tuft of fur, that was like her criteria. And I always wondered if that, I don't know, said something about her idea of what love is or something. You know, she was a very kind of like tough, very small, sinewy old woman, and I think maybe was part goat, or at least at least part magic, like a unicorn. This is called To Make Color, and it's much shorter than the long the long preamble I just gave. Every morning, my grandmother cleaned the Fisher stove in the back of our trailer, lifted ash in a shovel, careful not to spill the fine gray dust. Precious, she said, her breath smoking in the cold. Precious in winter's first lavender, not quite light. And you could smell it, the faintest acrid hint of ash, a crispness calling you from bed. You could watch her cap it in a chicory coffee can to stack among others, back bent from a long gone fever. For the garden in spring, she said. Thank you. And this is, I want to kind of begin a journey out of the trailer park, I guess, and into other parts of the world and kind of other parts of myself. And so this is a poem that I think is kind of a pivot point for this journey I'm trying to create in the manuscript, at least, even though it takes place in in Bellingham still. It's called First Star. It is here, in the empty lot across from Kmart, dusk falling on the cusp of summer, that you realize you love her. She has asked you to teach her to drive. You lied about having a license, and your mother's metro is not cut out for this. How she kills the clutch again and again as you brace your bodies against the dash, laughing. You are not cut out for it either. The way she jokes with the boys at your lunch table, grin flashing, hair black as volcanic glass. You cannot ease the ache her body makes in yours, no matter what you do, even when you are making love behind her mother's leaky apartment, or lying in the damp grass after, watching geese sign their mysterious arrow overhead. Soon her father will vanish again, her mother remarry and take her to Georgia. On the phone, she'll talk about pills she started and a man she met at church, her voice fading in the sound of traffic. But blink now and you are back in the empty lot. Blink and you were in the brimming grass, wet, watching the geese neck ever on. Tell her again they have needles in their noses, like compasses, guiding them to where they must go. Say you can see Sirius, the first star, though you know she is already sleeping like something crash-landed, unfathomable, from an even deeper distance. Her breasts below the coat you both share. Her wrists so defenseless that the world for the first time frightens you, and you begin in that light to know what it is. Something that I just feel fascinated by and kind of has bubbled up in this manuscript is the idea of what it means to see something or see a person, and the tenuousness of that, and how, even before this age of Zoom that we have been living in recently, it's always felt really miraculous to me when you have those moments that you share with someone and you feel like you kind of see them and they see you. And sometimes it can be an instant, with a stranger or something on a bus, you kind of recognize something in this person, maybe a loved one who's not, on this earth anymore, or maybe someone you haven't seen in a long time. Sometimes it can be, when you are able to somehow clear a little space in your day and you can sit across from someone and not have 12 other things that you're kind of having to think about or balance in the back of your mind. So this poem is is kind of a collage, I guess, of some thoughts, or really kind of questions, I guess, about what it means to see something, both in terms of seeing the other person and also seeing the world, you know, um, so so this is kind of broken up into a few sections. So I'll just kind of pause in between each one, and it's called the movement of fields, the movement of fields. I'd like to run my eyes along you and collect you as a pool fills with the image of a drowned bird, as the field outside your father's farm is alive with the shape of wind. While I write this, a young boy watches me as if to see what he might become. Someday, maybe he'll read these words and find me looking back. Sight is the mind making sense of the world's raw hunks and filaments, sketched in guesswork of occipital lobes, fusiform gyrus drawing out the differences between one nose and another, one cheek into the stark relief of a friend's face. Visual cortex showing where a ball isn't yet, but will be after the instant its image flickers up the optic nerve. We read this together, then stand on the dock, watching waves lacerated by light. One theorist thinks language came first through sight, not sound, that learning to read the tracks of our prey in the wilderness filled us with symbols: hoof, hair, bent fern. Something can mean without being. Something can imply. Dark hair in your comb, the jade plant you watered before you left, a photo replicating your body, which holds the whole ocean inside. If it's true, the first signs we learned were left by fleeing things. Every mark, a mark of escape. Every print, the shape of what's gone. And so we call these words a passage, Latin for pace. With language, movement, absence, loss became legible. The night we met was neon gin, your grin, limbs lifting in fake fog. On a napkin, your number was bird prints in snow. That night goes on moving in my memory. How we ran to the beach and you dived in dark surf, towing something silver away. It was easy for God to make blind life, and the first seeing thing was only a little harder. But the second seeing thing, to make something that could look into something, looking into it. Downtown glows at dusk. Our hands clasp in my car. As we glide below bright billboards, you fall asleep, which is familiar to me, though I can't see where you go when I watch you. So kind of, you know, I think for a lot of reasons, I left kind of the trailer park. I left, you know, Bellingham, and started to kind of explore the world at large. And this is a poem about being in London and kind of encountering someone that I was in love with, and then also kind of seeing that dissolve. And I think that travel can be very interesting, in part because it affords, I think, a wealth of those moments where you can kind of see into someone and you feel them seeing into you. And something, to me, it seems about the state of movement that you're in kind of facilitates that. You know, you kind of stick out more often if you're traveling, and I think you also notice things more. So this is kind of, I guess, about one of those experiences. And so it's called Portrait, Last Night in London. Apart from her body, I remember the birds. We woke at the same time as night came down among the purple trees. Her body, my body, and the birds, all waking at one moment. She in silence rising to sit by the mirror and the portrait she would not show me. While she painted, I walked in the park past graffiti that said, "Call your mother," and nodding policemen with red noses, asking myself why I would hope for a home in someone slowly falling out of love with me, while chatty British women left the mall with bags brushing their thighs, a sound like breath. I learned a secret before I left. The birds never flew off, but fell silent when someone was near. The color of dust, they just disappeared, until deep in my quiet, if no one passed, the whole tree would speak to itself again. And this is another kind of travel poem, and this one is called Wood and Wire. In Edinburgh, I could not understand what the cab driver said as he drove me to the restaurant. And inside, the only person who would speak to me was a Lithuanian with pink hair, who leaned above her wine and whispered, "Nothing is familiar." She had learned English in 10 months. She couldn't remember the day before because cheap ecstasy had scrawled so much calligraphy into her brain. On the pier that evening, 2 sunsets burned above the waves. Maybe the sky is mirrored so far north. She said she had forgotten to call her boyfriend, but didn't want to leave. She said she was building a violin, had won a grant, and once it was done, would ply wood and wire into new instruments no one yet knew how to play. A couple passed and she pointed. It is the cheeks, the breasts and ass, but especially the cheeks that make women more beautiful than men. A man is the sky, but a woman is the earth, generous and whole. Every morning she could remember who she was and some of the night before. Then her mind would loosen, she said, until everything goes like water. Even my language has no name for this, though we have 12 words for love. Its various pitches and distances, its songs of shifting range. She said she would not remember me, though she wanted to, and in her porch light held my jaw in her thin hand. Thank you. And this is another kind of complicated love poem, I guess. And this one is called "In the Bones." Takes place in Provincetown, Rhode Island. Have any of you been to Provincetown by chance? Okay, Sandy. Okay, cool. It's a really magical and interesting place, and I was there. I was there back. I don't know. It was probably like 5 years ago now, and there was this huge whale carcass that had washed up on this stretch of sandy beach, and I became kind of obsessed with it as as this love that I had been in for several years at that point sort of was starting to disintegrate also. So this is called "In the Bones." The finback had beached a long time ago. Storm scattered ribs, vertebra polished by sand, knuckle bones caged in black grass. All winter, as we fell out of love in the old barn, I read the long story of whales, how they were land scavengers once, like small raccoons who hunger drove into the sea. while you dreamed beside me, and wind worked the eaves into a song. Mornings I walked past pines growing stunted in sandy soil, head cocked to hear the moaning made by the bones. The last thing they said, a vestigial hip clicking on stone, how the body wanders, riding its loss from home to home, how the bones hold hard to this history. Thank you. So I think at this point, so at this point, we're kind of entering into poems in the manuscript that haven't been published anywhere yet. And they kind of are, I would say, sort of the final leg of this journey that the manuscript is kind of exploring, where I come back to my hometown and I kind of see it again, and feel kind of this distance from it, and maybe see it in some ways maybe more clearly, and see my family and the life that has kind of made me who I am a little bit more clearly, maybe. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see all your faces. I'll be sticking around for the open mic.
Well, everybody can unmute and let Ryler hear the applause. There you go.
So beautiful. Really beautiful reading.
Well, thank you, Ryler. I think we really enjoyed that, and so glad you could be with us, traveling all the distance of time and miles and everything to be here.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so